Backer time. Thank you very much. Distinguished gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Mr. Mafumi, the ranking member, for having this hearing. This is the old part of my old subcommittee, so I look forward to working with you as we progress. And thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I must say I'm impressed with the data you presented us in terms of indictments, prosecutions, convictions, and recovery. I think it is important to remember the context. Congress, in the worst pandemic in 100 years, in which people, by the way, did not allegedly die, they died. Almost 1.5 million Americans are dead. Mr. Garcia didn't mention it, but I believe his mother and stepfather succumbed to COVID when he was the mayor of Long Beach. All of us have stories of loved ones and friends and associates who died from COVID because protocols weren't in place, vaccines weren't yet ready. We didn't know how to manage this unknown thing. But also the economy was collapsing. Let's go back to April of 2020. The economy was contracting by double digits. Today, the economy is growing at almost 3%. Unemployment was hitting depression level. Today, the unemployment rate is 3.4%, and what plagues us is not enough workers. Manufacturing was contracting. Small businesses were failing about 500,000 a week, something like that. We pumped $5 trillion into the economy, and it worked. We turned around the economy. We saved small businesses. We saved state and local governments. We saved people's jobs. We kept food on the table. We kept people in their homes, free from eviction or repossession. It was a massive enterprise, and in that massive enterprise, we know there are bad actors who are going to cheat, and that's where you come in trying to help us prosecute those individuals and to recover taxpayer dollars that are at risk. Mr. Shoemaker, I remember particularly the Small Business Administration, and I focused on the other part of our subcommittee, which is the IT part. I believe the basic IT platform for small SBA is E-Trans. Is that correct?
The 7A lending program, yes, the E-Trans.
Yes. And I believe back in April of 2020, the normal annual budget of SBA is about $20 billion a year. Is that correct?
I think that's high.
That might even be high.
Yeah, yes.
And we pumped $600 billion into SBA in April of 2020.
Yes.
Over 30 times the normal budget of SBA. Is that correct?
That's correct. So SBA, its normal 7A lending portfolio was about $35 billion. So the CARES Act authorized $349 billion. And as you indicated, there was I believe Congress had a concern at that time. There were oversight resources put into place. But what was not foreseen was another $300 billion infused into the program.
Correct.
And another $150 billion to take us to $813 billion.
And the problem was that we wanted it to get to Main Street, to the mom and pop businesses, small minority-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned, that don't normally participate maybe in SBA programs. And that meant we had to find outreach to them quickly and to perhaps broaden the number of financial institutions and the kinds of financial institutions that might manage those portfolios.
That's correct. There were approximately 2,000 SBA lenders in the 7A program. That number was expanded to over 5,000 lenders to ensure that the money could, make it out into Main Street.
Right. So I think SBA is a great example. We wanted this money to go out quickly to save the economy and to save businesses and to keep people employed and the public served. And that put a huge burden on SBA. I mean, you had to kind of retrofit almost overnight. And that there were lots of hiccups along the way, but how would you grade the agency's performance overall, though, when we look back on it in an unprecedented pandemic with unprecedented amounts of money and demand for loans and loans turned into grants.
So our office, at the inception of the pandemic, you know, our job was to let SBA know of the risk and vulnerabilities that we saw based upon our past oversight experience. And in doing so, we let the agency know that strong guidance to the lending community would be vital to ensuring these programs are issued timely, and then also to have a robust internal control environment. So what is asked of any agency for any program, and certainly, you know, would have been an expectation of SBA at that time, would have an objective. The objective would be to provide assistance to eligible entities. And the ask from that point would be to establish an internal control environment to meet that objective. And so for an OIG's perspective, it is to have assurance that, you know, that's what the internal control environment would be. But you're absolutely right. There were guardrails that were lowered as a result of that. The Congress, you know, for example, the Congress did not allow SBA to utilize tax transcripts for the EIDL program. The Congress also mandated the PPP program have self-certification as part of the process. So when we talk about underwriting in the PPP program, we are not talking about underwriting that's anywhere near what a 7A underwriting would look like. So those guardrails were substantially lowered, and when you don't have assurance of an eligible entity, you at a minimum are going to lead to an improper payment, and as we see in these programs today, fraud.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mafumi.
Gentleman yields back his time. Distinguished gentleman from Greenville, South Carolina, Mr. Tim.